Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our Wet Wednesday webinar. My name's Louise, and I will shortly be introducing you to Claire Spendley from Waterwise. I'm just going to share a slide with you. There we are. Welcome to our Wet Wednesday webinar. The webinars are a series of webinars all to do with the water environment and different aspects that are impacting our water environment. This is the sixth webinar in the series. It's going to be the last one for a little while. We're going to have a little bit of a break over the spring and the summer. I'm hoping that rather than watching webinars, you'll all be getting out and about and actually visiting your local river and enjoying the great British countryside. So I'll shortly be handing over to Claire, who's going to be talking about drought and water efficiency. So this is a topic that I really wanted to cover in this series of webinars, and I'm really grateful to Claire for agreeing to do this for us. She's from an excellent organisation called Waterwise. If you don't know Waterwise, I recommend having a look at their website. It's absolutely fantastic, doing some really important work. I was really keen to cover this topic because I think it's a little bit underreported and a bit under the radar, and I really want to raise awareness about this issue of water scarcity, which is particularly a big issue in the southeast where we are. I was having a look at the rainfall data for the year just earlier today, which is available online. And it looks like we've had a below average rainfall in March and well below average so far in April. For the southeast, we've had just 11% of our long-term average rainfall to date in April. So unless we have a very wet end to the month, I think April's going to be a very dry month, particularly for the southeast. And last year, the drought started in March and carried on for a large part of the year. So it'll be interesting to see if that pattern is repeated this year. If you go to the QR code on the screen there, you'll be able to link to our YouTube channel where all of the recordings of our webinars are available. I've listed the 5 that are available there on the screen. So we started off with highway runoff with Joe Bradley from Stormwater Shepherds. The second one was with the lovely Dave Goulson, who was talking about insect declines, had a particular focus on the impact of domestic pet flea and tick treatments on our water environment. Thirdly, we were joined by Keith Herbert from Southern Water, who was talking about storm overflows and the issues of sewage getting into our waterways. And I was really keen to have somebody from a water company join us to talk through this issue with us. The fourth one was river restoration, which was with Pete King, who's from our neighbouring Rivers Trust, the Ouse and Ada Rivers Trust. And the last month's one was with Kat Kavanagh from Water Rangers, who was talking about citizen science. So some really interesting webinars up there on our YouTube channel, and this one will be available for you soon, shortly, if you want to share it. If you want to add any questions during Claire's presentation, you can use the Q&A feature, and we'll address those questions at the end. The webinar is obviously being recorded. If you've got any queries or any comments about the webinar series, then do email me. My email address is there on the screen. I'd really love to hear from you. My role is funded by the National Heritage Lottery Fund. It's part of the Downs to the Sea project. So if you just Google Downs to the Sea, you can find out more about that project as well. So I am now going to hand over to Claire.
Hello, everybody. Can you see my slides okay, Louise?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Far away.
So thank you for the introduction. As Louise said, I'm Claire Spendley and I work for Waterwise, and we're a UK-wide charity that campaigns for water efficiency. I'll tell you a little bit more about our work later on. But today I want to talk to you about the issue of water scarcity in the UK and most importantly, how we can tackle it. Before I start, I just wanted to note that I'm not an expert on nature and wildlife, but I do have an understanding of the impact of water scarcity on our rivers, lakes, and seas. So if you ask any questions that I can't answer, I'll try my very best to find someone who can and follow up after the session. So why are we talking about water? Well, we use water for everything we do. Water is critical for society, the economy, and the environment. It's vital for food production, transport, technology. And not many people know that it takes 14,000 litres of water to make a smartphone, something that everyone carries around in their pocket. It's also critical for life, for drinking, and for hygiene. And the effects of water scarcity are being felt across the UK right now. It has been reported that drought is now the biggest risk to UK nature. And if we don't do something about it, water scarcity will have significant negative impacts on our environment, our economy, and our health. The question that we get asked a lot is, doesn't it rain all the time? The UK has a reputation for being rainy, but this isn't strictly true. And as Louise just said, even this year, we're seeing lower than average rainfall in the spring. So some areas of the UK, like London and Dublin, really receive less rainfall annually than parts of Australia. I think it's useful to sort of frame what I mean when I talk about water scarcity. So we define water scarcity as a lack of sufficient clean fresh water to meet the demands of humans and ecosystems. And this could either be physical water scarcity, where our natural water resources are depleted and therefore unable to meet demand. And that's what happens during times of drought, or economic water scarcity. And that's when there is water available, but poor infrastructure, a lack of investment, or poor management means that we can't access that water. And in the UK, we're actually victims of both types. I also wanted to introduce the idea of water stress. So most of southern and central England, including Sussex, is now classified as severely water stressed by the Environment Agency. Water stress describes the pressure on water resources where demand for water is a really high proportion of what's available. So we know that we're experiencing this in the UK, but why are we running out of water when it rains all the time? Well, I think there are three problems. Problem one, there are more of us than ever before. So there are 12 million more people in the UK than there were 50 years ago, and they all need water to live. Problem two is we're all using more water than we used to. Every day, everyone is using almost double the water that people were using 60 years ago. And problem three is that human behaviour has caused a climate emergency. Our weather is visibly changing. We're seeing more extremes of drought and flooding, both of which affect our water supply. The Environment Agency have said that there will be 8 million more people with less water available and more water use due to climate change by 2050. And that's the growing problem of water scarcity. This picture is Kinder Reservoir in Derbyshire in the north of England. It was taken in July 2025, just after the area officially moved into drought status, and it stayed in drought status until early December 2025. Last year was the warmest and sunniest year on record for the UK, according to the Met Office, and we also saw the driest spring in 132 years, and that's what led to these prolonged drought conditions. And I'm sure that lots of you will probably have experienced first-hand drought conditions and water shortage in Sussex, which sometimes happens even when overall rainfall is not low, because a lack of rain at critical times during spring and summer means that we don't have access to enough water. And as a result, in Sussex, there was a requirement in North Sussex, there was a requirement for all new developments to be water neutral. And that was about concerns about how much water we were abstracting, taking from the environment and the impact on river habitats. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later, but it's really one key example of why we need to drought-proof the UK. So some statistics. In England, it's predicted that we will need an additional 5 billion litres of water per day to meet demand by 2055, or 6 billion if you include things like energy generation, food production, and data centres. There's a 1 in 4 chance over the next 30 years that households and businesses will experience water supply cuts. And we know that this is very real because in recent months in Kent and Sussex, there were an estimated 30,000 homes went without water for periods during December and January. Some of you on this call might have experienced that. And the economic impact of this lack of water could be between 25 billion and 40 billion pounds. So we know that there's a problem. We're all agreed we have a problem. Around 1 in 8 homes across the UK have been affected by flooding in the last 5 years. And with extreme weather events becoming more and more frequent, impacting agriculture, damaging infrastructure, risking public health, and negatively affecting wildlife and ecosystems across the UK, it's a human problem that needs human solutions. So how do we tackle it? Well, at Waterwise, we think we need a water efficiency strategy to mitigate the impacts of water scarcity. And there's a few different reasons. Firstly, it will help us to secure water supplies and adapt to climate change and to enable future growth, both housing and economic growth. So I mentioned water neutrality in Sussex. Also, in some areas of England, particularly East Anglia, there's a moratorium on new business water supplies, which means that new businesses can't open and get a water connection, and existing businesses can't expand because there isn't enough water to go around. The third reason, is that we need a water efficiency strategy to improve the natural environment. Every litre of water we save can be a litre more left in the environment, which protects river flows and groundwater levels. And this in turn can support local habitats and wildlife, such as the very special chalk streams in West Sussex. Chalk streams, as you probably know, are fed by groundwater. And that means that managing the chalk aquifers that we use to take water from the environment is essential to achieving good ecological health of chalk streams. And in the UK, we have 85% of the world's chalk streams, and they've been badly damaged over many years through over abstraction of water, pollution, and poor management of their environment, the floodplains and the catchments. In 2019, the Environment Agency reported that only 17% of chalk streams meet good ecological status, so there's a lot of work to be done to try and protect them. We also need a water efficiency strategy to help us reach net zero. It's well recognised that we're living in a climate emergency. Every litre of water we use also has a carbon footprint. And the water sector as a whole contributes approximately 6% to carbon emissions in the UK. Most of that is from how we use water once it gets to us, from heating water for showers, etc. But the process of cleaning the water so that we can drink it is also energy intensive, and so is pumping it around the pipe networks. And it's been calculated that if we reduced our water consumption by around 20%, it could cut UK emissions by 1%. And finally, we need a water efficiency strategy to reduce water and energy bills. We have a cost of living crisis in the UK. Saving water can help to reduce utility bills and also reduces the additional costs of new water supply infrastructure being added to future bills. So what I mean by that is when a water company needs to improve its infrastructure or build new reservoirs, for example, the cost of that is passed on to the customer. The energy required to heat up water for showers, baths, and hot water is estimated to be around 12% of a household heating bill. So using less water saves energy and money. Now, lots of people underestimate how much water they use in a day. So I'm going to invite you to have a little think about that and maybe pop the answers in the Q&A if you can. I'm not sure if that's possible. And then we'll see if you're correct in a minute. Okay, I can't see the chat. Louise? Were there any answers?
No, there wasn't, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's all right.
People should be
Um,
able people should be able to use, or there are some coming in. Maybe there's a little delay. So um, someone has estimated 400, someone's estimated 60, someone's estimated 40.
wow, okay.
Quite a range there.
Big range. So you can see on this slide that well, you've estimated a big range, and I'm going to talk about the averages on this slide in a second. First of all, let's just outline what I mean when I talk about water efficiency to set the scene. Um, Water efficiency for us at Waterwise is about reducing wastage rather than restricting water use. So, what we're looking to see is a way in which we can use less water to achieve the same result. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to sacrifice or reduce our quality of life. And as a starting point, it's useful to have an awareness of how much water we use on a global scale. You'll know the Earth is known as the blue planet because its surface is mostly covered by water, but the vast majority of that is salt water, about 97% of it. And then around 2% is trapped in ice caps. So there's actually only about 1% of fresh water on the planet that we can use. And that has to be shared across humans, industry, agriculture, plants, and wildlife. So the amount of water on Earth is finite. It's recycled over and over and over through the water cycle. And all the kids love it when we do workshops and tell them that they really are drinking the same water the dinosaurs drank. So we asked how much water you think you use. Well, businesses account for around 30% of the UK's total water use. Leakage from pipes from infrastructure is around 20%. And then household consumption is around 50%. As you can see from these fitted 40 litres, usually people underestimate the amount of water they use. England is the lowest in the UK at approximately 133 litres per person per day. And Scotland has the highest consumption at around 178 litres per person per day. And it seems that nobody, it's like the world's best kept secret. Nobody really understands how much water they use. A recent survey commissioned by one of the water retailers in the UK, Water Plus, found that 2/3 of UK businesses don't have measures in place to deal with water supply issues like burst pipes, which could slow down or stop business operations. So we think it's critical. And at home, we use a lot more water now than we did 60 years ago. In the 1960s, the average water use per person was around 85 litres per day. So you can see that we've drastically increased the amount of water we use. And the way we use water is also changing. I mentioned earlier the water footprint of a smartphone. Well, everyone will have heard of data centres. There's a lot of talk in the news about data centres and how they might affect our net zero ambition. But they also have an impact on water. So data centres store, process and distribute all of our data, and they need water for cooling. And lots of them use purified drinking water. There needs to be more research into exactly how much water they use. So there's a few sort of conflicting figures. Thames Water have said 25 litres a second. And another study said that a medium-sized data centre uses the same as 3 average-sized hospitals. All of this contributes to global water stress, and it's a way that we use water that wasn't around in the 1960s. The last point to say on our water use is that everything we own has a water footprint. A pair of jeans takes approximately 4,000 litres of water to make. A chocolate bar, approximately 1,000 litres. So there are litres and litres of hidden water use in our everyday lives that we don't even think about. I just wanted to take a moment to bring it closer to home. So I wanted to have a look at what's going on in Sussex in particular. The Environment Agency estimates that 2.6 billion litres of extra water per day are needed in the southeast alone by 2050. So that's half of that 5 billion litre a day figure I told you earlier. From the moment it comes out of our taps or falls as rain, water forms part of this natural water cycle, and we can't make more water. So that's why we need to protect it. In Sussex, 85% roughly of water supplied to homes comes from groundwater abstraction. So this means that the water is collected by drilling boreholes into the chalk aquifers underground. And due to concerns about the impacts of this on protected sites, water abstraction has been restricted. Some water companies have started to reduce the groundwater extraction that they're doing to try and balance the needs, the supply needs, the water supply needs to homes and businesses with environmental protection. So an example of that is Southern Water at Pulborough. The image on this slide I pinched from the WSRT website, I hope you don't mind. And it shows the River Ems, which last year really suffered because of the drought. Like all chalk streams, this river supports an extraordinary range of wildlife. So lots of protected species like otters, water voles, European eels. And they're not just impacted by drought and less water in the river, also less water creates a higher impact from pollution that come into the river from agricultural runoff. So that all impacts the wildlife that the river sustains. Now, really sort of local, I'm going to talk specifically about some work that's going on in the Portsmouth water supply area. So some of you in the audience might be supplied by Portsmouth Water in your house. Portsmouth Water supply 183 million litres of water per day to 324,000 properties. And you probably know, you'll have read about it in the news, that Portsmouth Water and Southern Water have partnered together to build the first new reservoir in the southeast since the 1970s. It's a massive new infrastructure project that's vital to protecting our water supply in the UK. And the idea of it is that it will help to provide an alternative water source and therefore protect the chalk streams, the River Test and the River Itchen. The way that it's going to work is that in the reservoir is Havant Thicket. In the Havant area, there are lots of natural springs, and they provide about 30% of Portsmouth Water's supply. They deliver water all year round. And actually, I think they're thought to be the largest individual source of spring water in Europe, which I was really surprised about when I read it. What happens is in the winter, and when there's high rainfall, those springs create more water than Portsmouth Water can take or needs for its own customers. And that surplus goes straight out to sea. So the idea is that the reservoir will help to capture this excess water and store it, and then enable Portsmouth Water to share water from their network with Southern Water. And that will make a more resilient water supply across the whole region. And to give you an indication of the scale of the project, the reservoir will cost £340 million, and it is due to be operational by 2029. But it won't solve everything. So I showed you earlier the national average in England of water consumption is 133 litres per person per day. Residents in the Portsmouth Water area use 154 litres per person per day on average. So some work to do. And Portsmouth Water also has the lowest proportion of households on a water meter, which we'll come on to in a minute. So it's no longer business as usual, and I think we all have a part to play in helping to address the UK's water crisis. There is not a single correct answer. Significant capital investment in critical water infrastructure, like the reservoir we've just talked about, is going to be essential to bolster supply. Robust demand management strategies from water companies widespread smart metering across homes and businesses, and aggressive leak reduction programs will also be vital. We can't close the water gap without those things. Also, the implementation of forward-thinking policy and regulation will be crucial to incentivize sustainable water consumption. And in the sort of policy and regulatory environment, we've heard that significant change is coming, which is encouraging. Fostering innovation in water management technologies and looking at alternative ways of managing our water will also be key to long-term resilience. But even with all of those measures in place, we can't close the gap between supply and demand unless we, humans, change our behaviours. So using water wisely is a collective responsibility. We all have a part to play, including individuals, households, communities, businesses, the water industry, regulators, and governments. In England, there are national targets linked to the Environment Bill to reduce per capita consumption, so the amount of water we use per person, by 20% by 2038 and to 110 litres per person per day by 2050. And at Waterwise, we think the target should be even lower than that. Water efficiency measures, so reducing the amount of water, reducing demand for water, are expected to address over 65% of this supply-demand deficit across England. And also, these water efficiency measures will be more important in the first 5 to 10 years of that period because they can kick in earlier than any of these large infrastructure and supply schemes can be delivered. So I said that we need a water efficiency strategy. The good news is we have one. In 2022, Waterwise published the UK Water Efficiency Strategy to 2030, and over 100 organisations were involved in helping to shape it, stakeholders across the sector. It sits alongside national and regional water management plans, and it outlines 10 strategic objectives that we think will help to address the issue of water scarcity. And lots of the strategy focuses on actions to help support everyone to use water wisely at home and in their businesses. I'm not going to go through the strategy in detail. You can find it on our website. But I am going to talk a little bit about some of the measures within it because they're things that we can do at home to make a difference. So if we succeeded with all the actions the strategy outlines, how much water could we save? This graph gives a bit of an indication. The figures are based on a mix of evidence from existing programmes and research that we carried out, coupled with what we believe are realistic assumptions for rollout. Altogether, it totals at least 1.5 million litres a day by 2030. Now, I wanted to pull out a couple of examples. So I mentioned that Portsmouth Water has the lowest proportion of smart meters. The strategy found that smart meter rollout could help to reduce consumption by more than 350 million litres per day. So we think monitoring and measurement of how much water you're using is the first step to saving it. The second thing I wanted to pull out was the water efficiency label. So the government have, Waterwise lobbied for this for a long time, and the government have suggested that they will be introducing a mandatory water efficiency label for water using products. So that's things like your showers, your washing machines, your dishwashers, your bathroom taps. Similar to an energy efficiency label, you might have seen the color-coded label with how much energy an appliance uses. And the research shows that if that label is put in place with minimum standards, and those standards are linked to requirements for new build and sort of large scale developments, it could save approximately 300 million litres per day. So two very easy, real measures that could make a big difference. Toilets. We can't talk about water efficiency without talking about toilets. So quick fire question. I can see there are things going on in the chat. I keep getting little pop-ups. So who knows if this is true or false? Leaky loos waste between 100 and 210 litres per day. True or false? What's the consensus, Louise?
The consensus is that that is true.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
It is false, I'm afraid,
Oh,
because they waste even more than that. They
of
waste
course.
400 litres of water a day. And I'm going to come back to leaky loos in a minute. First of all, I'm going to take you on a little diversion about the sort of fundamentals of how we can save water. So, in terms of taking action, there are some sort of concepts that we can apply across all situations, whether that's at home, at work, or in industry. The first one is understanding and mapping water usage. So we know that taking regular meter readings, ideally once a month, or even better, using smart meters, can really help to save water. Not only because you're more conscious of how much you're using, but also because it can help you to spot inefficiencies and signs of leaks, continuous flow. The second thing is about identifying and fixing those leaks. So I mentioned leaky loos can waste up to 400 litres of water a day. Um, and this could contribute, fixing all of those leaky loos could contribute to around 10% of the additional water capacity needed to cope with an extreme drought in England by 2050. Thirdly, installing water efficient fittings, fixtures, and devices. So there are lots of technologies, fittings, and fixtures on the market that can really help. This could be fittings that use less water, such as eco-friendly dishwashers or low-flow showers, or it could be retrofitting devices to help save water. So you can get things like tap aerators that you pop on the end of your kitchen tap, or cistern displacement devices on toilets to make your existing fittings use less water. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, encouraging a water saving culture. So at Waterwise, we're asking everyone to engage about water saving at home and at work. We encourage businesses to engage all building users through things like posters, internal comms, rewards, campaigns, and awareness days. And I'll come on to that in a minute as well. But we think you can do it individually at home and in your community too. So I think I've established people's behaviours play a huge part in how much water they use. A good example of this is if we think about COVID-19, which is a long time ago now, but the water sector recorded a spike in water demand during the pandemic. And this was really because of the change that it caused in our behaviour. There was lots more hand washing. We were more conscious about cleaning. And then also we had more time. We were at home more often. So we did more DIY, more gardening during lockdown. If we're going to have enough water to go around in the future, we need everyone to become more water efficient. And there's lots of advice available. We at Waterwise, we do free webinars on how to save water at home and at work. But I wanted to just go through some easy wins. The first one is complete the Leaky Loo Challenge. So go to the Waterwise website and have a look for the Leaky Loo Challenge. It's a really simple way of checking if your toilets at home have leaks. And they're normally very simple to fix too. It's usually just a rubber washer that needs replacing. I'm not going to go through all the tips. There's lots of tips on our website, and you can see on the image in this slide 20 water saving pledges. 20 water saving pledges is part of our Water Saving Week campaign, which is taking place during the week commencing the 4th of May. And these pledges and lots of other resources are available on our website, so please do get involved. Now, we know about the how, but onto the why. We hear all the time, why should I save water if the water companies don't care? And it's true, the water industry has a bad reputation and they need to play a part, particularly when it comes to sewage. And we'll come on to how government and policy and regulation can reinforce this. But the way I see it is, it's like recycling. We need to look after the natural resources that we have by reducing overconsumption And that has to happen from the ground up as well as the top down. Um, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about some sort of big projects that are taking place that help us to address the issue of water scarcity. And they're really important alongside us all changing our own behaviours and valuing the water we have. So the first one is about wetland restoration. Nature-based solutions are a really important part in helping with water management in the UK. And across the UK at the moment, there's various projects underway to help reverse significant historical losses in our wetlands. I think the target is 100,000 hectares of restored or created wetlands by 2050. And the reason that wetlands are important is because they act as sponges. They help to manage water flow. So they mitigate both droughts and floods. And that means that we have a more stable supply of water for human and ecological needs. Wetlands absorb water when it's really wet, including rain and floodwater, and store it and then slowly release it during dry periods. So that helps us to reduce the impact of drought. The other surprising thing about wetlands is that they can filter out pollutants from agricultural and industrial runoff. And that means that the existing water sources we have are more usable, less unsafe. The project that I've got an image of on this slide is in Yorkshire, the Lower Derwent Valley National Nature Reserve, where they're looking to restore 600 hectares of floodplain meadows next to the River Derwent. And it's been a big project involving lots and lots of volunteers. And the floodplains will protect homes from flooding, but they'll also support the water resource for the drinking water suppliers of Yorkshire. So you think it's just about flood management, drought management, climate management, but actually it also helps us to address water scarcity. Next, I want to talk about tradition, about 4,000 years old, we think, and it's carried out successfully around the world. Most of us, when we think about rainwater harvesting, we think about having a water butt in the garden, which everyone should have to help keep our plants happy when the weather's hot. But it can be adopted on a much larger scale. So in the UK, rainwater harvesting is governed by building regulations. They're designed to make sure that the construction, alteration and maintenance of buildings can safeguard both public health and the environment. But at the moment in the UK, any non-potable water, so water that can't be suitable for drinking, has to be in a separate pipework system from drinking water. And that keeps us all safe, mitigates the risk of contamination. It's an important regulation, but we often hear that it's the main barrier to big rainwater harvesting and water reuse projects. And there is some progress being made. So new housing developments are now required to have sustainable drainage standards, and they were really introduced to help manage flooding. But recent changes to those standards mean that rainwater harvesting is now, they call it priority one. It's really important in terms of managing runoff, and that's really good news for water efficiency, because it means that developers are not allowed to cite cost as a barrier to implementing rainwater harvesting. We think that more research is needed to really understand how rainwater can best be treated and maintained, and the costs and incentives to make sure that we're implementing it in the UK on a larger scale. And we've also recently done some research around the skills required to implement rainwater harvesting and reuse on a larger scale. And there's definitely a need to upskill and have schemes in place to make sure the expertise is readily available for people, plumbers, installers, to maintain the systems properly, so there's no unintended consequences like cross-contamination. But research that we did a few years back did find that rainwater harvesting systems are really cost effective, even at very small domestic scale like bungalows. And that's especially true when you take into account the benefits to wider society and not just the individual homeowner. So things like carbon emissions, flood risk reduction, etc. And most rainwater harvesting systems produce a carbon saving too. But they're still expensive. So they can cost anywhere between £2,500 to £70,000, depending on the scale of the system. But it's something that we want to see more of. So we're doing a lot of work around this at the moment. Linked to rainwater harvesting is grey water recycling. And it's another way that we can help to reduce the use of mains water by reusing it for more than one purpose. So an everyday example could be you could reuse your bath water to water your plants, for example. But there's lots of smart technologies emerging around grey water recycling. And one of these is a wastewater heat recovery system, which can reuse shower water to help you flush the toilet. The technology is progressing really fast and it is available, but again, more research is needed, especially on barriers to uptake, costs and incentives, and that kind of thing. And in the research that we have done, we found that grey water recycling tends to be more cost effective when it's used at a large industrial or commercial scale. Community scale approaches to rainwater harvesting and grey water recycling. So again, it's something that we would like to see pushed and advanced in the future. And I think the big question is how we can make the systems more mainstream and perceived to be affordable and a worthwhile investment. And also with grey water recycling, there's an ick factor. So lots of people in the UK in particular don't like the idea of reusing water, but it is quite common in other parts of the world. So something to think about. Smart water systems are another new technology that's emerging. So this is about using technology and AI across the entire water supply network to minimize waste. Lots of analytics, lots of digital technologies that help to monitor and manage water networks in real time. A really good example of this is a new project in the east of England called the Safe Smart Systems Project, and it's run by Anglian Water, and they're using sensors to monitor the network continuously. So instead of a water company having to go out and fix a leak reactively, they can prevent the issue from arising in the first place. And it's a really interesting project. It's the first of its kind in the UK, and it could really transform the way that the water industry is managing its infrastructure. I mentioned water neutrality earlier, but I just thought I'd touch on it again. It's essentially the concept that a new housing development wouldn't increase the total water demand on local water supply. So a housing development could be classed as water neutral if it reduces water use by introducing water efficient fittings, appliances, and water saving behaviours. If it reuses water, such as rainwater harvesting and groundwater recycling, like we've just talked about. And then also often they offset additional demand by either retrofitting existing buildings in the area with water efficient devices or water reuse systems. There's a good example of this in an affinity water project called Project Zero, and that's combining technology, behaviour change, and this idea of offsetting, reducing demand from existing customers within the local supply area. And the project is trying to create a blueprint for water neutrality that could be used at scale across the industry. So as you can see, there's a whole range of innovative solutions emerging that could help us to drought-proof the UK. And we're just really keen that more people know about them and that more work is done to help advance those technologies. The final piece of the puzzle that I promised to tell you about was government policy, regulation and public engagement. So in England and Wales, we're seeing some progress. Last year, the government commissioned an independent review into the water industry known as the Cunliffe Review. And they published a water white paper that confirmed that in England and Wales, water industry regulation is going to be simplified and brought under a new single regulator led by a chief engineer. There's more investment in infrastructure planned over the next 25 years than ever before. I mentioned the Havant Thicket Reservoir, but there are actually 9 new reservoirs due to be built in England, and improvements to wastewater treatment works and storm overflows to help address the problem of pollution. And then coupled with this, Ofwat has recognised the need for behaviour change and are anticipated to launch a £75 million campaign, which will take place across 5 years to try and raise awareness of water scarcity and the value of water efficiency with homes and businesses. So very quickly, at Waterwise, our vision is that water will be used wisely every day, everywhere, by everyone. And I hope that this presentation has outlined how we think this can be achieved. I mentioned earlier, we're a charity. We're the UK's leading body on water efficiency, and we're working to achieve this vision through policy, research, education, and public-facing behaviour change campaigns. One of the things that we have run is the water literacy programme. This was modelled on carbon literacy, which is about saving energy, and it's a well-established 10-year-old programme. The water literacy programme is a learning experience aimed at anyone who is interested in saving water. It was a pilot programme, and we've now accredited 2,000 people as water literate. And later this year, we will be launching a scaled up version across the UK, so look out for it. I mentioned Water Saving Week. That's one of our campaigns. We've run a number of public facing awareness and behaviour change campaigns across the year, and they all have one goal, which is about inspiring change and driving water efficiency across the UK. I wanted to also mention Water Night. So Water Night takes place in October. It's a one-day campaign that's been successful in Australia for many years, and we brought it over to England about 3 years ago. And the idea of Water Night is to encourage people to turn off their taps from 5 till 10 p.m. and not use any water at all. So it's about trying to get people to notice how habitual their water use is and how much they take it for granted. So in summary, the UK and Ireland is running out of easy, reliable access to water where and when it's needed. Water efficiency is the fastest, cheapest, and most sustainable way to close the supply and demand gap. Everyone has a role to play, but we need coordinated action and cultural change to make sure we can all use water wisely. Reducing our water use now will prevent big burdens on the environment and costs in the future. And although water-saving technologies, large infrastructure projects and innovative research are progressing rapidly, it's the small actions to be efficient with water that can make a huge difference. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. That was a fantastic presentation. You packed in so much into that. That's absolutely fantastic. And yes, I meant to mention Water Saving Week in my introduction. I forgot, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because we'll be doing some social media around Water Saving Week, which is the week commencing the 4th of May. So do keep an eye on Waterwise social media and the Western Sussex Rivers Trust social media for that. And I have done the water literacy training programme. And I definitely recommend people sign up for that if they get the opportunity. It's really, really well worth doing. I've written down loads of notes because there was so much in there. I'm very glad I've recorded this so that I can go back over what you said. And I was very happy that you mentioned our lovely River Ems, our beautiful chalk stream. My colleague Sarah is the chalk stream resilience officer for the River Ems and the River Hambrook. So she'll be absolutely delighted that the River Ems got a name check there. It certainly is a river that's been badly impacted by water abstraction, particularly last year when we had the drought. So I was really glad that you mentioned that. Okay, there's a few questions that have come in. Let's have a look. So there's a couple of questions from Tom. I'll do them separately. So Tom says, is it true that between April and September, none of the rain that falls makes it to the aquifer as it is used by plants or evaporates? So water companies should limit their abstraction in this period to ensure waterways have flowing water.
Interesting question. What I know is true is that in periods of low rainfall, the aquifer can't replenish. And so when we have drought, there are restrictions on how much groundwater the water companies can abstract. So I'm not going to say that it's always true between April and September, but there is some truth in the fact that low rainfall means that aquifers cannot refill.
Yeah, it's my understanding that when there is drought or very dry conditions, the soil moisture deficit is obviously, very little moisture in the soil. So when it rains, that soil absorbs the water before it can start trickling through to the aquifer. So and that can take quite a long time. So even when there's rain, it can still be a considerable period of time before that's actually replenishing the aquifer.
Yeah, that's right.
Another question from Tom. As a water consumer, I would like to understand my consumption of water. Is it possible to have a traffic light system that lets me know when there is less water available?
Ah, I quite like that idea.
Mm.
Um, So not that I don't know of anyone that's exploring this as an option. I think there's obviously lots of smart meter technology that could show you how much water you are using, but that's not necessarily linked to how much water is available. And really, the only time a consumer might have an understanding of how much water is available is if their water company puts in place a hosepipe ban or temporary use ban, as we call them. But I love the idea. I'm going to take that away and have a little think.
Mm. Great, thank you, Tom. So question from Veronica. We are in a semi-detached house and have been told we cannot have a meter due to how the water is brought into the two halves of the building. Is that a wider problem?
Ah, so all water companies across the UK are involved in huge smart metering programs at the moment for homes and businesses. It's mandated by the regulator, and the smart meter data is going to be game changing in making sure that we're stopping things like continuous flow leaks really in both commercial and domestic premises. Um, the biggest issue in installation of smart meters in businesses is an inability to access the premises to put a smart meter in. I don't know whether there are significant issues in smart metering or in semi-detached houses, as you say. But I do know that there are sometimes issues in multi-use properties. Um, and there's lots of technology that's being developed to help to manage that. So a smart meter measures how much water is supplied to a property. Now, there are other types of technologies, such as smart valves, that can be fitted at different levels within the property. So rather than just on the main supply pipes level, imagine if you're in an apartment block. And they're very, very clever. You can see the data on your phone. Sometimes if they measure how much water is used across a day on average, down to how long an individual might spend in the shower. And then if they spot an anomaly, they can give you an alert and either shut off the water or tell you to go and check that your teenager hasn't been in the shower for an hour and a half, really. Um, and so, what we'd like to see is more of that type of technology becoming mainstream to help to overcome this issue of places where the infrastructure doesn't support accurate smart meter installation.
Right, thank you. Um, Question from Tom. If smart meters are installed, could there be a variable rate depending on water availability?
Yes, the answer is yes. I think there are some water companies that have trialed variable tariffs on water, so increasing the price of water when there is less water available. It's still really in its early stages, and in the UK, the regulation means that the pricing of water is quite strictly controlled. But we are seeing some sort of pilots and test projects around variable tariffs and even some really interesting sort of incentive projects. So Severn Trent Water, for example, currently have a project with Nectar, the card that you get points on when you do your weekly shopping, where if you save a certain amount of water compared to the previous week in your water consumption, you get Nectar points. So you get a reward for doing that. And I think lots more of these innovative approaches to managing demand by water companies could really help to make a difference.
Great. Thank you. Question from Anna. A lot of clean water goes down the drain whilst you wait for the shower or sink water to heat up. Any ideas to reduce that? And she has added that she puts a bucket under the shower until the water starts to run hot and then uses the water in the bucket either in the kitchen or on plants. But that does mean carrying buckets of water around the house, which is inconvenient. Yeah, any ideas about that, Claire?
I love your commitment, Anna. Keep going with your bucket. Um, It's true that at the moment in the UK, there's not a lot of technology that helps to support the water that's wasted when water heats up. And the recommendation till now has been put a bucket in your shower. However, there is some emerging technology coming. So I had a really interesting conversation with an organization that are developing a technology that will solve the problem for your kitchen taps specifically, in that it will measure the temperature of the water and it won't let the hot tap turn on until it's warm enough to come out of the tap. And there's lots of nuances around sort of how consumers will feel about that, whether they think that the tap's broken because there's a delay until the water comes out, whether they should let the tap run and then capture the water. But there is research and development into products that are looking at trying to reduce this. And Waterwise ourselves, we've been research into combi boilers and how much water we're wasting. And I don't have the results of that yet, so I can't give you any more detail, but we're definitely looking at it because you're right, it's a big problem.
Great, thank you. Don't think got any more questions, but I have got an amusing comment from Tom that says that he thinks the Australians probably drank more beer on water night when they couldn't turn their taps on. I wouldn't like to comment on that. If anyone wants to add any other questions, then do. Otherwise, I think we're done. Claire, I did have a question because you mentioned the Havant Thicket reservoir, and obviously we desperately need more reservoirs. Havant Thicket hasn't been without its controversies, particularly around sort of destruction of woodland and that sort of thing. But you've got to put reservoirs somewhere. So obviously finding suitable land for reservoirs seems to be a bit of an issue. Is that true or is that a myth?
Um, I think it's the same as any large infrastructure project. We're not a big country with loads of space. And so there is always going to be controversy about, and what we don't have is empty space. If you're going to build a reservoir that can hold 8.7 billion litres of water, it's going to have to destroy some habitats. And I think there's always going to be a trade-off. I'm not suggesting it's an ideal solution, but there's always going to be a trade-off between protecting wildlife and making sure that we have enough water to sustain human life too.
Yeah, it's not an easy a black and white situation, is it? So
And I suppose the other thing to say on reservoirs is I think I mentioned there are nine, I think there are nine sites now approved for new reservoirs in England over the next 10 years or something like that.
mhm.
50 maybe.
Oh, another couple of questions come in before we wrap up. So a question from Marcel. Could we put solar panels on the reservoir?
Do you know, I don't know the answer. I think it would make sense. I don't know whether they're planning to do that. I know that at Havant Thicket they're planning to have a visitor centre and other sort of leisure facilities. So it won't be just a reservoir. It will um, include sort of green space for the community, walking, cycling, horse riding, that kind of thing. But solar energy generation, I don't know the answer to. I'm going to go and find out.
Okay, great, thank you. No, I'd never thought of that, but that is a good idea. Um, and also, just someone saying thank you very much for such an informative and interesting talk. Good luck with your work, as it is so important. I hope the computer and data processing industry will also get onto the subject of reducing water use. So I think people have very much enjoyed your talk, Claire. So thank you very much, and thank you for doing this for us. I think it's such an important topic. So, and your talk was really excellent and had so much information in that hope lots of people will watch it online as well. So
Thank
thank
you
you very
very
much, Claire. We shall
much.
finish up there and have a good rest of your evening, everyone. And hopefully we can restart the webinars after the summer break in the autumn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.